All right. So, okay. So, good day. Welcome to the Zoom chat. Okay, maybe just as a quick reminder, today the Zoom will be recorded again. So just the audio will be recorded and my screen. So you're very welcome to join for a chat, of course. You won't be seen, you will only be heard. Or you can write in the chat, of course, that's still possible. And I will read it out then. Exactly. Apart from that, what can be said? Not really much, I guess, because what apparently happens is all there is. It's just naturally whole and complete, and there is no additional realization of what apparently happens of any kind. It just doesn't exist. It's part of a dream. Any kind of realization, so to speak, would be part of the dream, and it's rather a hope than it ever happens. There is no realization of anything. It would just be within the dream of the person, and the person would say, I am someone who's separate and who still needs to find something. For most people, that's totally unconscious, so to speak. Not that it needs to be conscious, it just is completely unconscious. There's just this subtle assumption that everything I do is good for something else. Everything I do will pay off in the end. That's a subtle hope. That's a subtle energetic hope, so to say, if you want to say so, that accompanies the experience to be someone. In spirituality, so to speak, this whole has gotten a name. It's called enlightenment or liberation or self-realization or fulfillment. And it's exactly the same assumption that there is a point in the future in my life where I become whole as a conscious experience, or where I see that everything is whole, or where I feel totally loved, or where I feel totally safe and taken cared of, and whatever the story is, all of that would be part of the dream. And as I said, the basis of the dream, if you want to say it like that, is the sense to be someone who's separate. I am someone who is now here, who is separate from everything else, who is having an autonomous, separate existence, who can consciously choose to do A or B, who is consciously responsible for his or her, for its own life. That's the dream. And what this message apparently does, for no reason actually, not in order to make something happen, is pointing to that this whole setup doesn't have any reality at all. And that all seeking, all the efforts to become a self-realized person, to become an enlightened person, to become a fulfilled person, are futile and illusory. The good news are that what apparently happens is just naturally whole and complete. It doesn't need any kind of realization. It just doesn't need that. It never needed that. It's just part of a dream that there is someone, a person, in the first place. In that sense, that's it. There is no teaching. There is no one to teach. There is no one who could teach. It's this. That's all there is. Okay. first question in the chat. You say that the collapse of me is like a death, meaning the disappearance of self-awareness without finding any higher reality instead. Okay, but people who survived their death describe it differently. Yeah, they had a near-death experience and speak of their self-awareness, leaving the physical body and meeting the higher reality in the form of light, love. How does this fit your message? Well, it fits this message very well. Because as they say, they speak about a near-death experience, which in the end is just another life experience. And it's just, in the end, it's just being the sense of I, being self-awareness, having another experience, leaving the personal story, becoming more and more pure, becoming more and more light, and there can be light, but it would still all be within the person's experience. So in that sense, it's exactly what it is, a near-death experience. Yeah. So it's still consciousness moving towards something. And then being, that's what many of them report, also the ones that I've spoken to. It feels like being pulled back into normal life.
Hi,
Some
Andreas.
people would have decided to go on. Yeah.
Hi, Andreas. I was listening to a Jim video last night, Jim Newman, and he was. I'm sure I've listened to it before, but I hadn't heard it before. If you'll get what I mean in a minute, I think that he was talking about the me, and in various conversations, he talked about the me being the knower. You know, I know that something's happening. The owner, I know it's happening to me, and then the seeker, that I want something else. And then another conversation came up where someone talked about the observer. Whether somebody who's aware of all this, and then it got into consciousness and awareness. And Jim, like you and Tony, said, well, actually, there's still someone there that's kind of like aware of that consciousness, and it's still happening to someone. And then he talked about or seemed to be talking about the difference between seeking and looking for something else, and a longing for something else, and a kind of like a sense that that what we're talking about, although it's indescribable, everybody has a sense of it and they're longing for it, like it's home. And that phrase "home" came up again. And somebody asked the question, well, who's longing? And Jim said, well, actually, that's we're now getting into the undescribable and the unknowing of it. And so I'm not sure if there's a question, but there was it was an interest. I don't know. It seems like a distinction between knowing, the knower knowing, the seeker seeking, and the owner saying it's happening to me, as distinct from this completely indescribable sense that what is happening apparently is completely and utterly indescribable and ownable. Yeah. So I think had I been live with Jim, I would have maybe said this last night, but it was a recording, so I'm talking to you instead. Yeah. So I don't know. Have you got anything to add to that, or is it kind of like?
Well, I'm not sure if I got it all, to be honest.
Okay. I'll write it down if you like. I know how much you love reading.
But yeah, thanks actually for speaking to me. I appreciate that. Well, the thing is that distinction, as I said, I'm not sure if I got it really, but that distinction can't be really made. So when we speak about the seeker and knowing, and the seeker knowing stuff and longing and all that stuff, that's a story. That's already what seems to be happening, which in the end is completely unknowable. Because all of that is the dreamed reality. The seeker lives in the dream of knowing, and it lives in the dream of knowing itself, of knowing what seeking is, of the knowing what longing is, and all of that. But in the end, that too is completely unknowable. It's all stories or dreamt knowledge.
Because the illusion is that there's someone doing that, where actually that's just part of everything anyway.
On the one hand, exactly, there's still the dream that there is someone doing that. Yeah. And on the other hand, because exactly this too is the unknowable. That's the thing. In the story, one could say what apparently happens is the sense to be me, and out of that comes the seeking and the longing. But the sense to be me, including seeking and longing, happens as impersonal as anything else.
Yeah, I think he was, that word longing was, he seemed to be talking about it as separate from, different from looking and wanting and seeking. That there was, but of course, in saying that, you're defining it as something.
Kind of a deeper longing, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, it was an obviousness, an immediacy, that there's no one doing that, but there's I don't know, people, including myself, I kind of like, you turn up at a live meeting and there's this kind of like, no one knows it, but there's this kind of like energy of coming home, and there's I don't know, it is undescribable.
Yeah, I know. Okay, I know. One could say, I mean, it's still a story.
Sure.
But one could say the sense of unfulfillment and the longing for home automatically come with the sense to be a person. And yeah, one could say in the story, the seeking is already an attempt to answer that longing.
Yes.
So in a way, but that's very, in a way, it seems as if the longing is deeper than the seeking, so to speak.
Yeah, and he, there was other people talking about the body mind, and Jim was saying, well, I don't really know what you mean by body mind, and then he was talking about and people were saying about, well, how is it different for you now? And he said, well, there's no one here, but he was talking about the constricted energy that is all to do with the apparent me, and that when that apparent me falls away, there is none of that constricted energy, because there's no one there.
Because
there's a realization it was never there in the first place.
Yes, because that's the same thing. The person is the constricted energy.
Yes. Yeah. So that's why, I do actually, I'm not doing it much at the moment because of lockdown, but I've had a lot of Alexander lessons in the past. Are you familiar with Alexander technique? And there's
I've heard about it.
Okay, so a teacher takes you in and out of a chair with very light touches, and if it may be 4 or 5 times in the last 10 years, there's the sense of me not being there. There's just getting out of the chair, that I don't. There's not doing it, and it's completely obvious that I never do that anyway, but only in that, I don't know why I'm saying this really. I think it's just this idea that there's no constricted energy when I just get out of the chair. That's it. That's why I was saying it. That there's same with other things. Okay. All right. Nice seeing you.
Thanks. Nice.
Take care.
Hear you. Thanks. Okay. There was a question going on. To prove that we are underlying consciousness behind our mind, Ramana Maharshi used to recall the dreamless sleep. He said that if we were not this conscious continuum, we would wake as an altogether different person every morning. I think this is quite a dull argument, but I cannot say why. Can you? Oh yeah, it's absolutely dull, and it's so not Ramana Maharshi-like, to be honest, in my opinion. Because it's dull, because it's obviously coming from logic. It's coming from thinking it through. It's coming from an observing perspective, drawing conclusions. Of course, that's dull. Yeah, totally. Of course. It's the person saying, yeah, because I think that I was asleep, because I'm now here looking back, knowing that there was sleep, this would mean that there was consciousness going on during sleep. No, in the end, it's still a conclusion from logic, from a here, now, conscious perspective. That's why it's dull. It's utterly dull. Yeah, I thought I have the same impression. Yeah. Okay, someone writes, I've just read this on the internet. Yeah, there's a lot out there on the internet. Your essence is always already peaceful, whole and complete. Is there an essence? No, there isn't. No, there isn't. One could say the natural reality is in peace and is whole and complete. And the natural reality is sitting in front of a screen, being you, being me, thoughts, feelings, being happy, being angry, being bored, being alive. That's naturally peaceful, whole and complete by just being itself. The dream of the person is that there is a personal state that is that. Like the person assumes there to be an essence, like it assumes itself to be some kind of hidden reality, some kind of spiritual, energetic thing behind the physical body, so to speak, or within the physical body. And it assumes the same separate spiritual essence in the outer world, or somewhere hidden in the outer world. That's basically the idea of God, or a hidden essence, something which is more true than the physical reality, so to speak. And there just isn't an essence. There isn't a me in here, and there isn't a hidden essence of energy or something within other things, so to speak. So in that sense, there is no separate essence.
I have a question.
Yes?
Possible?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I have a question. A question concerning reincarnation and former lives.
Yes.
The question comes from a story I read about a woman. She went to psychotherapy and couldn't get any help from the therapy, and then she made hypnosis.
Mm-hmm.
And she went back into former lives, different, all kind of former lives. And through this experience, she got healed from her anxiety and panic. And so she couldn't come out of her anxiety and panic. But through this experience, she found peace and trust and or something like that. So it seems to be a proof that there is a reality behind reality, a deeper reality.
Yes.
Seems to be, yeah? So what's about that?
Well, well, in the end, it's not really assuming a deeper reality. It's just assuming that the continuum, the past is longer, so to speak, that the personal life goes longer back in the past, so to speak. The thing is that there just is no answer to this. Like, because it assumes there to be a certain reality in the first place, which is already a limited picture. And now suddenly there seem other experiences which don't fit that narrow picture anymore. And now the person has to widen its picture and include another story. By the way, I too had those. I also traveled back in past lives in some sessions. The thing is that it just turned, when the sense of a person turns out to be a complete dream, it just all turns out to be illusory. And then there's just not much difference between 5 minutes ago, 30 years ago, or 500 years ago. The reality of it just drops completely. And remembering, so to speak, a past life would just be what apparently happens without any knowledge if it happened or not. Same with 10 years ago. The only thing that weaves a story about what is experienced would be the person. And what is experienced can be way different from our Western day-to-day consciousness, so to speak. There can be all kinds of weird experiences also.
Well, the point for me as a therapist is that it has really an effect.
It had an impact in the
That
story,
people really got healed through this wider view and experience. Huh?
Yeah, I understand. Oh, yeah.
But it doesn't mean that this is has any reality. That's
Yes,
what you say.
exactly.
Huh?
Absolutely. Like everything else. That's the thing. The person would see reality confirmed in any experience. But that's the thing. The only thing that confirms reality, again, would be is the me. It doesn't matter if it's just looking at the tree over there, or if it's remembering the past, or if it's making plans for the future. It would always me confirming, yeah, I had a thought about the past, so there must be a past. I was looking through pictures from my childhood, so that must have been real. But in the end, it's again all the time the person just confirming reality by it experiencing.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Andreas.
Yes.
Hello. Kind of in that same vein. So people are starting to talk about creating avatars for themselves, and with this advent of AI, and it's like creating images of ourselves in a digital space so that it lasts forever.
Yeah.
And it feels really real that there's different companies studying connection interface between the brain and the internet. Like right now we'll be having these meetings in 3-4 dimensional ways here in the near future, and I have a feeling we're going to still be asking the same question: is this real?
Yes.
Okay.
As long as there's the sense of me, so to speak, this conversation will not end.
Right. So that sense of me, my question being, can they upload this sense of me into a digital space? So people are going to still feel, I'm going to still feel real, even in that digital space. Does the question make sense?
Well, the question does make sense and is logical, but I would be utterly, utterly surprised if this will be able ever, because there is no sense of me. They would have to locate and find the sense of me first in order to do so, but so far they haven't succeeded. And I would be pretty surprised if that will ever happen, to find the sense of me. They haven't found it in spirituality, they haven't found it in science. It does not exist. So they can probably upload what the person regards as its own personal thoughts, which is a complete dream that there are personal thoughts, personal feelings, which is a complete dream that there are personal feelings, though I think they don't really know them actually, really, because it's not electricity, it's hormones. Or maybe they do, I have no idea. I take that back. So, but they never found that there just is no sense of me.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Anyways, yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Oh yeah, it is wild. Okay, question. You say me cannot do anything to liberate himself. Yes, basically because there is no me in the first place. Jesus says, knock and it shall be opened unto you. Does Jesus really give only false hope? Well, let's put it like that. How the seeker would understand it. Oh yes, of course, it's a false hope. Yes, that I will become whole and complete, that I will become an enlightened me, so to speak. That's the dream. Yeah, that's the false hope. And of course, Jesus, it's 2,000 years ago. It's, well. But regarding this meeting, I can say, I appreciate very much you asking questions. So that's very welcome. Okay, next question. I have found confirming through the mind or out loud that I'm not just the mind or body. I'm prior to everything. I am formless. And other sentences like this has a useful effect without adding any form or weight to the words. A kind of neti-neti. What do you think about this? Well, the thing is that usually, which is a story, that there is something usually, this points rather to an awareness, to an experience of awareness. And that wouldn't be what we speak about here, because the person using neti-neti, or finding out, so to speak, that it's not its thoughts, that it's not its feelings, that it's not the body, but there is something which I really am, so to speak, which can't be really verified in a way. So awareness even can understand that it can't know itself, but it can somehow be itself. And then it feels like being prior to everything. And in a way, the person, self-awareness, can also feel like prior to everything, because it's the cause for opening up the space to experience. So me can, of course, say, before I'm able to experience a body, before I'm able to be aware of thoughts, I am already there. I must be there already in order to do so. So that would be a way of the person living in a method of neti-neti. I'm not this, I'm not this, coming from an observing and aware standpoint. And it can come to the conclusion that I am prior to everything else that exists. And my impression is that that's how it's usually meant. The thing is that in that setup, you end up being something which, again, is somehow separate from everything else. Because I'm prior to everything, and everything are already too. Me as the reason for there to be thoughts are two, me and the thoughts, me and the body. And all this, I'm not the body, I'm not the thoughts, are actually coming from this awareness. And usually it's answered, there is something which I truly am. But it's exactly that first cause, so to speak, that first thing, which seems to be prior to everything, which is already illusory. In that sense, there isn't anything prior to everything else. There isn't anything which someone is and there isn't anything which someone isn't. There is no someone. In that sense, one is everything and nothing. Or all there is everything and nothing. But there is no one positioning him or herself within that. So that's my impression on that. Thank you. Okay, there's a question. Yes, feel free to speak or write.
Hi, Andreas.
Hello.
First of all, thank you for these meetings. Appreciate that. My question is, we are having these talks discussing about the nature of me. So is there a process? It seems like a process where so with these talks, there's a greater intellectual understanding of me and the reality of things. So to me as a person, it feels like there's a process, even though you say there's not, but it seems like there's a process where has to be intellectually understanding first, and then an energetic shift might happen. So would you say that, is there possibly a process that has to take place?
Well, no. No. Well, yes and no, because one could say what apparently happens may be a process, or it may be looking like a process. Mm-hmm. But the experience to be in a process from less wholeness to more wholeness, the experience to be something that moves towards the actual goal and may potentially arrive there, that's the dream. In that sense, there is no real process going on. There isn't less wholeness, which will at some point end up in more wholeness. And it's not that now there is a less sense of wholeness that at one point will become a more sensed wholeness. In that sense, there's no process.
So in terms of a shift, I would imagine somebody having this energetic shift wouldn't be a person who's completely against this message, who's not even open to listening to this message.
Yeah, and I would doubt that, to be honest. Because in a way, the person, when there is a sense of a person, the person is always against this message. And the death of the me, the apparent death of the me, of course, can come out, not really come out, that's a story, but it could happen out of a complete anger and rage against life and against this message and fighting with it. And it's absolutely possible. And in the end, it's the person's experience anyway.
Mm-hmm. But okay, that might be possible, but what is more probable? I would think that what's more probable is somebody who's coming to these meetings, who's open to at least listening this message despite resistance. It's probable that somebody like that would have that energetic shift. Would you say that?
No. No, sorry, no.
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to find a way to find a method to have that energetic shift.
But you couldn't be doing openness anyway.
Mm-hmm.
In a way, the attempt to be more open or the attempt to do openness would actually exactly come out of the person's unopenness in a way. So it's a contradiction.
Mm-hmm.
It couldn't be done anyway. That's the thing. Even if openness would be needed, it wouldn't be something that can be done. Of course, the person could attempt to somehow fake some acceptance or something,
but in my personal experience, I would say that when I first heard this message, I had a lot of beliefs that were completely against, like I would downright not accept them. But over time, listening to the message over and over, I don't know if there's some energetic move, but I do definitely think there's some intellectual openness, or like just in thought, probably more openness.
Oh, absolutely. That's what I meant in the beginning. That's very likely that that's what apparently happens. If that's how it is for you, so to speak, that's absolutely and completely what apparently happens.
Okay.
The attached idea would be that in the end there is someone who will become liberated or enlightened or whatever, or fulfilled person after or in being in that process. That's the dream. But of course, I understand that there may be less concepts now or another understanding. It would still be understanding, but another understanding, maybe more openness to the words, maybe more relaxation in your experience. All of that may definitely be what apparently happens, of course.
I guess what I've become open to is, I don't know if it's the right word, but psychological suicide, if that's a term. Like that's what I guess what we are doing here, and I guess that's what's happened with you. So I guess I in the beginning I would like be completely against it, but even though there's a me here with me, but I'm open to the idea of non-existence.
Yeah. Oh, that's what I mean. That's what apparently happened, but it's not a real process. The person would attach the idea of a process to it and still hoping that this will lead to the actual goal. That's what I meant. That would be the dream. But what you describe is what apparently happens. Things apparently change.
I can't help but take your words and still make it into a process. I guess I can't. I'll still end up doing that.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, there is no suggestion that you shouldn't do that. It's just pointing out that this is a part of the dream. But I don't even suggest to you to not do that. As you said, how could you? No, it's all right. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's absolutely fine. It's a dream anyway. So
yeah, true.
It's not. It's also not really wrong believing that. So.
I can't do anything about it. So if I resist it, it becomes stronger. So I've tried doing that, but can't do anything about it. Yeah. Cool. Thank you so much, Andreas.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, question. Hi, Andreas. Without a me, can comparison still arise? Oh, yes, it can. Yes, but it would just be functioning, of course. Oh, but there's, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the brain, in a way, compares, well, other times maybe too much, but yeah. What about jealousy? Well, to me, jealousy can't really happen as such, at least not what I would regard as jealousy, which is kind of, jealousy for me is a story in a way. There can be comparing and feelings out of comparing, but without the story of there being real persons, real people, I think jealousy is very difficult. So jealousy for me is rather a story than a feeling. But there can be comparison, like, I don't know, other people, they belong together. Sorry, it's not the same question, but like someone else, I don't know, I can't make up a story now, but yeah.
Andreas?
Yeah.
The context of my question is it's for like psychological research with long-term space travel and doing a project of living together on Mars, right?
Yeah.
So there's group dynamics, right? Stressors, emotions, And I don't, like the previous questioner, I don't want to turn this message into something to try to make that project go more efficient and then do the flip and do the opposite.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of science, right, in group conflict that shows that, well, there has to be a me in order to communicate to another me in order to mediate conflicts or solve problems.
Yes.
So what would you do in situations like that where people are actually training with the belief that there is a me and that there is other me's?
I'm absolutely 100% the wrong person to ask that. Because there are no me's. You can't work with me's in a way. I can't do that. There isn't anyone, so I can't. Sorry, I'm the wrong person.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you.
No, you don't have to apologize. It's just like,
but I think there are a lot
real world example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Question. I read your book and these lines struck me. Every experience of presence is suffering. Every experience of being something that is naturally woebegone. I don't know if that's the right pronunciation. Okay, I feel it is so true, but I also feel being more in prison. Well, yeah, that's a dilemma because it's in a way, yeah, I know, because the person would regard this as a truth, and in the end, it is its experience to be me, to be imprisoned. They are both. I mean, of course, what this message fortunately is saying is that it's exactly that presence, that assumed experience of presence doesn't have any reality at all. Yes. But in a way, it's saying you are suffering. To be you is suffering, which is a complete story, of course, because there is no you or no I to be that. But I understand that it feels like that. Seen from the person in the end, that's exactly how it feels anyway already. Yeah. But as I said, it's a dream. I mean, the person now might adopt this truth and suffer from thinking this. That would be a bad side effect, which is just a side effect of being a person, running around and believing something. So now the person might run around and think, oh, my presence is suffering, and assuming that there is a real presence and that there is suffering. Yeah. It's not real.
And isn't it just an idea that suffering shouldn't happen anymore?
Oh, that's another.
Or is it more true that suffering still happens and there's no one experiencing suffering?
Yes, one could say so. I mean, one could make a distinction here, apparently, that the person is suffering from everything and also from suffering. The person suffers from suffering, so to speak. But yeah, when the person drops, there can still be things which would be regarded as suffering. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And of course, the whole idea that the seeking has to end, or that my sense of unfulfillment needs to be fulfilled, of course, belongs to the dream. Nothing needs the end of me. Nothing needs the end of the illusion to be me. Nothing needs the end of longing for wholeness.
And no one needs the end of suffering.
Absolutely. Oh, totally, of course.
So suffering is okay, or isn't it?
Well, it doesn't know that, but yes. It's
in a way.
Happens and doesn't need an answer. It's utterly whole and complete. Yes. Yes. I mean, since a few thousand years, humans, or man, so to speak, tries to find ways out of suffering. and the best they come up is believing in the Bible or something. It's an impossible task. And yes, it's part of a dream that suffering needs to be ended and that stuff. No, it never needed that. Whatever is regarded as suffering.
And there's no one to make it end, to make it stop, to make it end.
Exactly.
So
That
it's
just,
in a way it's impossible to bring it to an end, except it ends.
exactly. Exactly. Because on the one hand, there isn't anyone who could do so. But on the other hand, the only one who would identify suffering as suffering would again be the me. So it's not even something, a separate reality that could be stopped, because it's naturally and undividedly happening together with happiness and joy. And I mean, suffering is, in the end, suffering is just feelings. Not, you can't intellectualize it, but the one who turns it into the story of suffering would be the experiencer. That's the thing. Most people just live 80 years, constantly thinking, oh, this can't be it. This can't be it. But it's it all the time. And for 80 years, it was just fine living one's life thinking, oh, this is not it. This is not it. No one cares. It was never needed, clarity or the end of suffering or an answer or the seeing of this is it was never needed. It was just a dream of the person that thought, oh, but I still need to become enlightened. No, well, of course not. Okay. Question. I don't know how to live in the world. Oh, yes, of course, because that's a dreamt reality. Living in a world, I am someone who is living in a world and who could know how living in a world is or how that functions would be part of the dream. So no one knows that. Many people claim to know, and I know there are books about that, but no one really knows. Because basically there is no life which is separate from the world. Okay, question. Suffering is resistance. Should not happen. How can that happen without me? Well, that's the thing. In the story, resistance may apparently happen, but there isn't anyone living in the experience of resistance. That's what I mean. In the story, one could say the person suffers from suffering. The person suffers from circumstances, or believes to suffer from them. Of course, when the person drops, in that sense, that's the end of suffering, or it's the end of the illusion of me suffering from circumstances. But apparently, circumstances still happens, which is painful feelings or body pain or whatever. But the illusion of I suffer from that from a personal standpoint, that drops, of course. In that sense, the end of me is the end of the suffering. But of course, not in a way the person would assume it to be. Because the person would say, the circumstances from which I suffer will end when there is no me. And that's absolutely not the case. Yes. Question, but suffering can lead to a heart attack. Well, that would be all right. So how it can be said there is no need to do anything because there is no me? Well, it's not that things are not done. Doing happens by itself, reacting by itself. Reacting happens by itself. Life happens by itself, apparently. But the only thing, so to speak, which would live in the dream of I have to do something, I need to do something about anything, would be the person. That which lives in the dream of this personal experience of need to become active as that center. That's a dream. Things happen by themselves, not because they are needed for something, just because they are what apparently happens. Wholeness doesn't need anything. It doesn't have a certain outcome in mind. But if reacting happens, that's what happens. Absolutely. Yes. Well, question. I'm caught between this message and using suffering for growth. Why does the me play both sides? Oh, because both sides sound attractive for the me. So that's the thing. For the person, both concepts sound kind of right. So.
Can I expound on that? So like with high achievers, high performers, people, goal oriented, there's still that drive to do that here for me, is to achieve that. Suffering is needed in order for personal growth. Like, does that make sense?
Yes, I mean, in the end, that's would be just another way of dealing with life, coming from a personal standpoint. At least it acknowledges suffering in some way or the other. But of course, what we talk about here, the actual prison, so to speak, which would be me, is still attached to it. That's all. But it's all right. There's nothing wrong with that. At least it doesn't say suffering is wrong. But yeah, seen from the person, it's still not experienced as everything. It's still regarded as something you have to go through until the actual goal is happening. So.
Thanks.
Which is all right, of course. And of course, but that's a bit, I don't know. But in the story, one could say, but yeah, it's just right. But of course, suffering in a way is on the one hand natural temporarily and somehow plays its role. It does what it does automatically. But the person wants to own that and say, I'm growing as a me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, question. I, for example, don't need to be enlightened, but just to be healthy mentally and physically. Yes, whatever your goals are. Yes. I don't want to be enlightened. I just want to be happy. All right.
I have a statement. What seemed to be very clear to me, I talked to my wife and she said, let go your ego and so on. And it seemed to be very clear, and there is no ego at all. I can't find it. And there is no one who has an ego or has no ego. Huh? But this is, in a way, it's not really a clarity. It's not nothing like an insight. I can say now I have it. It's still not to grasp. or to understand. It's just a fact. There is no ego. It's not to find.
Yes.
And there is no true self free from ego, or which can be free from ego.
Yes, absolutely.
Simply, both is not there. So this seemed to be very clear, and still no one can have it, huh?
Absolutely, no one can have it. There is no one living in a clarity about it. There is no one arriving in that. There is no one knowing it.
No one can use it as a technique or as a lifestyle or something like this.
Not a single bit. Absolutely. Yeah.
And yes, and this is still, it's a bit frustrating, I have to admit. because my life long, I'm 60 years old now, and my whole life I was a seeker from my very youth, and I'm conditioned in this finding the
yes,
the final insight, which is clear and which can be held. Huh?
I know, it would have been so nice. Yes, it just doesn't exist.
That's all.
That's all. Yeah, that's all. And there is no gain in that. There is no gaining in that. It can't be known. It can't turn into one's own experience. It can't be used. All of those things. There is no escape from what happens at all. There is no arriving in what, yeah, absolutely. There is no gain at all possible of any kind, so to speak. Yeah.
That's all.
It's wonderful. But for no one.
There is some joy in it. That's maybe this is a little hint that it's okay.
Yes, it's naturally okay. But again, it's not a joy that can be owned or that you can count on, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yes, it's whole and complete. It's all right. Yeah. It doesn't matter. It's freedom. Yeah, it's both. On the one hand, it's freedom, but it's not anyone's freedom.
Mm.
It's not a freedom that separates itself from anything else. It's everything. That's why it's no one's. Yeah.
It's not freedom in opposite to
Exactly.
anything.
Yes.
To non-freedom.
Absolutely. Exactly. Yes.
Mm.
Yeah.
So let's see. Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't know what for, but thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Cool. Okay, last question from the chat. So, has society been gaslighted by a false promise of enlightenment by a process? Well, society, I mean, you know, all of that just is what apparently happens, but it's just, I mean, all of those ideas just come out of the first idea or the first dream, namely that there is someone. So this whole package, so to speak, is the personal experience, to be someone who is on a path, who is unfulfilled right now, who is looking for fulfillment in something, in becoming enlightened, in becoming more happy, in becoming healthy, in staying healthy, in staying enlightened, whatever. So in a way, it's just the person's experience to live in hopes, in ideas, in this felt unfulfillment. So it's not really anyone's fault. It's not society. It's not the parents. It's not really the priests, so to speak. It's just the sense of I am, which assumes itself to be there, where all of this seems to come out of. But then, on the other hand, no one's doing that. No one's knowing all of that. It's not really happening. There isn't anyone, and there isn't anyone who needs to escape from that, and so on and so on. But yes, this whole package is a dream. Okay, in that sense, fortunately, there isn't anyone. There is no person. There is no ego. There is no person to wake up. There is no dream to get rid of. There is no right or wrong. There is no in the illusion, and there is no outside of the illusion. All there is what apparently happens, and it's exactly as it is. It's exactly this. There's no way in. There's no way out. There is no one to arrive, but there is no one on a path already. It's just this. It's exactly as it is. There won't be anything more or anything. It's this. It was this all the time. Thank you very much. I wish you a
Thank you, Andreas.
wonderful
Thank
day.
you.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Nice to see you.
you
Have a
very
nice
much.
day.
B2 says
Thank you,
bye.
Andreas.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye, Andreas. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye,
Thank you.
Andreas. Thank you.
Goodbye. Bye.
Thank you, Andreas.
Thanks.
Bye.
Nice to see you.
You too.